Today I'm going to share with you guys some behind the scenes footage of a really cool music video that I had the privilege of filming for a couple very talented artists. I'm going to show you guys how I lit the scene, my camera setup, as well as some of the techniques that I use to help create depth within the image. Now I encourage you guys, go check out the full music video. I will leave a link down in the description for you below, as well as links for all the gear that I used in the making of the video. Ready? Let's check it out. To start out, this was filmed on a worship center stage at a church. We cleared out most of the stage, and since the stage already had some really cool texture with the wood paneling in the background, I just grabbed a couple chairs and a table that they had in the green room that kind of matched the warm tone, the warm vibe that I was going for, and we placed those right in the center of the stage on a pretty cool looking rug. Now, just as a side note, this is where it is important to do a location scout, of course, whenever possible, but I already knew what I was up against, and so I was able to plan out most of the scene long before the shoot ever began. Next, I set up my main key lights, which for this setup, I wanted to go with a reverse key light for a bit of a moodier look. The key lights that I used were two Aperture Amaran F22X flexible matte lights. These lights have great color accuracy and have quite a bit of output for their size. Originally, I was gonna mount these lights to the tubing at the back of the stage to avoid stands within the shot, but I didn't have the right super clamps, and the clamps that I did have, I just didn't trust to put those lights up there. So I actually used a portable backdrop frame to hold the lights. They worked out pretty well. They weren't too distracting at all since the stands were black, but that's another great advantage to these lights. They're pretty lightweight, and so I can mount them to something like a portable backdrop stand and not have to worry about them falling over or getting knocked over very easily because they're so lightweight. But once I got my key light set up, I had them turn off all the house lights and the stage lights except for the par lights that were hitting the wood paneling in the back. Those, we did our best to dial them into about 3200 degrees Kelvin. They're RGB lights, so they didn't have a Kelvin setting, but I think we dialed it in pretty well. Then I took a few of these little 12-inch tube lights by YC Onion, and I just stuck them to the metal pipes at the back of the stage and set these to 3200 degrees as well, just to add a bit more interest to the scene. Now, I'm a big fan of these tube lights for several reasons. For one, they're fairly color accurate for their price point. I don't say that lightly. I do test my lights with a Sekonic C800 spectrometer, but they're full RGB. But what the big benefit of these lights is to me is that they run off of 18650 batteries, which I have a ton of these. Now this is huge to me because most of these 12-inch lights at full output are going to give you about an hour to 2 hours of runtime, and then you've either got to figure out a way to charge them or hook them up to some external power source. Now if you take a while to set up your scene and then you do an extended take, that can become an issue. Where these, all I have to do is simply swap out the battery and I'm good to go, and if I have enough of them I can run indefinitely. But these lights are great and I highly recommend them. Bet you guys thought that was my key light, didn't you? Next, I set up my fill light, which was a Godox VL300 with a 32-inch glow parabolic softbox. And I set that light to, or I should say it's a daylight light, which is set to 5600. Now this gives me a bit of color contrast and helps push those cool tones into the shadows. And it also gave me a pretty cool catch light within the talent's eyes. For a bit of texture and to help lift the shadows, I did add some haze to the scene, and I did have to add haze in between each individual take for continuity, just because the room was so large it did dissipate fairly quickly. And as a side note, and I hope these things help you guys out, because I really do spend a lot of time researching any bit of gear that I purchase before I do, because I want to make sure that I'm making the right choice. But I did a lot of research on purchasing a hazer, and this one is actually considered a phaser, as are most of them within the indie filmmaking world. For whatever reason, they just call them hazers. But the one I purchased is made by Rockville and is better than most within this price range. It has a lot of output, better than most, and comes with both a wired and wireless remote, and also has DMX control. I don't necessarily need it, but it's nice to have the DMX control. But not to mention, it's actually half the price of the name brand equivalent. So if you are looking for an inexpensive way to improve your image, rather than buying a new camera or an expensive lens or something like that, I highly recommend trying some haze in your scene, whether you rent one, you buy one, or even just using the atmospheric haze in a can. That's what I started off with. It does make a big difference. I use it all the time. I mean, you can see it in the scene here. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot, but it definitely makes a difference. So I recommend giving that a try. But for my wide shot, I used the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro with a 15mm IRIX Cine lens on a Pro-M Polaris dolly. Now, if you want to see a little bit more in-depth look at my camera setup, check out this video on my Pocket 6K Pro rig build. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on that, and it's a pretty unique setup that serves me very well and is perfect for run and gun situations. But my exposure was set to ISO 320 at T2.6. That's wide open for this lens, and my white balance was set to 4000 Kelvin. Now, I also placed a few plants in the foreground and in the background, and I did place one on the table as well in the midground. This helps add dimension and a more 3D effect, especially during moments of parallax. Now, as cinematographers, our whole goal is to take a 2D image and make it look as 3D as possible. And during parallax, when you're focused on that midground, having something in the foreground as well as the background really exemplifies that, because when you're parallaxing, that background's gonna look like it's moving faster than the foreground and kind of give it that three-dimensional look that will help draw your audience into the scene. But finally, for my medium close shots, which was used for the singles of each individual talent's performance, as well as the two shots, I just moved the dolly over to the table using the same 15mm IRIX lens. And this shot was also used for the close-up of the guitar. So very simple, I didn't have to swap anything over. I just took the whole dolly and sat it right on the table and did the performance shots of each talent. And it actually worked out great, because during the duet parts, I can still just pan over and get a nice two-shot of them and get that close-up of the guitar. But we did a total of 4 complete run-throughs of the performance, and again, I did have to add haze in between each of those for takes just for continuity. But we did the wide, the close-up of each talent's performance, and then one of the guitar. But that's pretty much it for today's breakdown. If I forgot something, or there's something further you want to know, or if there's something that you would do differently, just let me know down in the comment section below. I love to hear from you guys. Other than that, that's pretty much it. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I will see you on the next one. Thanks for stopping by.